A question we get asked all the time here at Ashdown Roses, and one that I see on the garden forums as well, is what is the difference between an own root rose and a grafted rose, and is one better than the other? Well, first of all, let's talk about the difference, okay? The difference between an own root rose and a grafted rose, from your standpoint as a customer, is there isn't one. I know that sounds a little weird, but let me explain. If you buy the polyantha rose, the fairy, for example, and you're still buying the same rose above the ground, whether it's grafted or whether it's own root, because above the ground, it's still the fairy. It's what's below the ground that's different. Okay, let me explain real quickly what a grafted rose is. A grafted rose is where you take a rose like the fairy and you graft it onto an understock. The most popular understock in the United States is Dr. Yui. You probably all bought a rose at some point. Beautiful white rose, up from the ground comes this sucker. At the end of it then you see these little semi-double red flowers that look like this. This is Dr. Yui. Dr. Yui is an understock. It's a little semi-double red flower. Beautiful thing, but it basically blooms only in spring and it's used widely as understock here in the United States. That's what a grafted rose is, a piece of rose grafted onto an understock. An own root rose is where you take a little piece of the rose, you stick it in soil, under a mister more than likely, you wait till it sets roots, you grow it on. So in other words, the rose above the ground, be it the fairy, is the same as the rose below the ground, which is also the fairy, which means it's on its own roots. So a grafted rose is grafted onto understock, an own root rose is struck from cuttings, it roots, and that's basically what an own root rose is and what a grafted rose is.
To my right is a grafted rose, and on my left is an own root rose. Let's take a look at the grafted rose first. On the grafted rose, this is the understock coming out from the ground. In this case, it's Rosa multiflora. That's the understock that we used. Right here, this little piece right here, formed by this V, where this little stem is coming out, that's the rose that we grafted onto the understock. So all my new growth has to come from in here. Anything that comes from down in here or beneath the soil is the understock. That's the graft there, or the bud union. That's the other term that you hear all the time, and that's the understock right there. The own root rose, since the roots beneath the soil are the same as the rose above the ground, look at this piece right here. On a grafted rose, you might normally say, well, that's a sucker. Well, on an own root rose, it's not a sucker, even though it's coming away from the base over here. And I might even get more of them coming out as time goes on. This is one of the reasons why I actually prefer own root roses. I get a fuller bush, and I'll talk more about that in detail later. This is the procedure for grafting a rose. This is understock, in this case Rosa multiflora. We've got it in a pot. This is also done quite often in a field. You normally do this closer down to the soil, but so you can see it, I'm going to do it up here. You start by making a cut in the shape of a T with a budding knife. That's what this knife is here, like that. Then you lift the bark back to expose that white underneath. I tend to go very slow because I don't do this very often, and I don't consider myself to be very, very good at this. Next, I'm going to go ahead and insert the bud eye in there. That's what this is from. This is the variety that I want to bud. I have an eye right here. I'll just take the knife, insert it underneath it. You pull off a little piece like that. Sometimes there'll be a little white back there. You can pop that right out of there. In this case, I got it just about right. That'll slip right down inside there, like so. Just push it and tuck it down in there. You can see how that's seated down in there? Then I'll make a cut there. Once I know I've got the eye tucked in really nicely, then I'm going to use some of this parafilm to just simply tie it off. And all you do then is you just start wrapping, and as you stretch it. The thing about the parafilm is basically it sticks to itself. So as you continue to wrap, it continues to stretch and it continues to stick. And that is basically it. Then you wait for that little eye to start to swell. The parafilm will rot away. The eye will come through. You'll cut this off here like that, and that'll push that little eye, and there you have a grafted rose. Own root roses are struck from cuttings, like I talked about. We use long branches like this that we've cut outside this morning. They stay in water all the time. They never come out of water except when I'm actually doing this process. We do a 2-eye cutting. There's a cutting there. I'll cut a 45-degree angle. I'll make a score to try to encourage more roots from the base. I'll cut off some of the leaves, and then I cut it right into a piece of water like that. And we just keep going up the roses like this. This is something that once you actually get pretty good at it, you can do a little faster. As you can tell, I do this a lot more than I do the actual budding itself. The last thing I want to say, because I've shown you how to do this, is that a lot of modern roses, and particularly those released around in the last 20 years, are under patent or under trademark, and breeders earn royalties from these roses. That's how they make their living. It is illegal to propagate those roses. Many also, including myself, feel it's unethical because the breeders, that's how they make their living. Also, small nurseries like ourselves, that's how we make our living. So while I'm showing you to do this, and I would certainly encourage you if you're trying to save a family rose or your grandmother's rose or something that you've had in a long time or just trying to have some fun with friends, first of all, go to a source like Help Me Find Roses to see if the rose is under patent or trademark. If it isn't, please don't propagate it. It is illegal and you're taking money away from the breeders. Secondly, if the rose is widely available in commerce, try to purchase one from one of your independent rose nurseries like us. This is how we make our living. But I hope this gives you insight into how the roses are made. Now let me show you the next step with own root roses.
This is where own root roses get their start. This is our misting area in the back of our propagation tunnel. These misting heads go off every 10 to 15 minutes. In fact, it's a great place to stand on a nice, hot day. I'll tell you that right now. Give them a second. This is what they do. It's just a gentle fogging. The idea is to keep the leaves wet while they're beginning to root or set roots. These are some trays that we've done. You can begin to see here. These are just rooted cuttings. These have barely been struck. This is a variety called Brennus. This was stuck on the 21st of June, which is about 4 or 5 days ago. You can see there's nothing going on, no roots happening, nothing happening to it right now. This is a tray of cuttings that's already been through the rooting a little bit. In fact, here we have Dr. Van Fleet from June 2nd. So these cuttings are now just about a month old, not much more than that. And if I can just gently lift one out here, here you go. You can see a pretty nice root ball beginning to form right there. Another couple of weeks, that'll be ready to be transplanted. The answer to the big debate about what kind of rose does better, grafted or own root, really is answered by the kind of rose you're buying. There is no doubt that some roses do better as grafted roses. A lot of the modern roses, particularly the modern hybrid teas, and certainly florist roses and exhibition roses, actually do better on grafted understock because they need that vigor to push them and make those long stem cut flowers. Okay? Now, I feel that all the old antique roses, the old garden roses, and a lot of the modern shrub roses, climbers, ramblers, in other words, garden roses, are much better on their own root, and here's why. Because what I want from a garden rose is I want a full plant, be it a climber, rambler, or a bush ground cover. I want lots of canes from the base, lots of new canes reinvigorating themselves. I'm going to get that from an own root rose. I'm not necessarily going to get that from a grafted rose. That's the first reason I like them better. The second reason why is if you live up north and you get like a hard winter, or even here in South Carolina, 3 years ago we had a late freeze in April. I lost some grafted roses, but the own root roses, even if they died down to the ground, when they came back true, they came back as the rose that I purchased, the own root rose. Better winter hardiness in an own root rose. So that's the reason why I personally feel for garden roses, own root roses are the best way to go. Now the last thing I want to leave you with is this myth that grafted roses become established quicker. It's not really true. The difference is perception, okay? A grafted rose, by the time it arrives on your doorstep, is about 2.5 years old. It's been about 6 months for the understock in the ground, the rose is then grafted, and then about 2 years of growing in the field. Most own root roses, as currently sold in the United States, are less than a year old. So it's not that they become established more quickly. It's just that the rose is older when you buy it. That's the basic difference. Let me illustrate this point. This is a grafted rose. This is grafted on multiflora. I grafted this last summer in a pot, and then this was bumped into a slightly larger pot, all right? That's a grafted rose from last summer. These are own root roses. These were struck from cuttings last summer. So basically, these roses and this rose, which is grafted, are the exact same age. You tell me which one got established faster.